Alberta's premier is deploying so-called sovereignty legislation and threatening other action to help the province avoid federal rules aimed at greening the power grid, arguing the goal of a zero-emission grid by 2035 is unconstitutional. Stewart Elgie is a professor and the Jaroslawski Chair in Clean Economy and Innovation at the University of Ottawa. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
I think we better start there, Stewart. The argument is that the feds imposing these rules on the province is breaching their rights. Is that true? Is this unconstitutional?
No, is the short answer. Canada's on pretty solid constitutional ground in bringing in new climate and clean energy regulations, and Daniel Smith really knows this. This is really a fight about how quickly we move to reduce emissions. The constitutional arguments are more of a smokescreen. What happened is a couple of months ago, the Supreme Court partially struck down the federal impact assessment law. They said that the federal government doesn't have authority over all aspects of greenhouse gas regulation because we're a federation in Canada. But they also made it clear the federal government has broad authority over the environment and climate change, and it was really just about that one act. In fact, in the Supreme Court case, the lawyers for Alberta admitted that the federal government had constitutional jurisdiction to regulate over climate change under the very power they're using for these clean electricity regulations. That statute, the one they're using, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, has already been upheld constitutionally by the Supreme Court of Canada. In fact, it was Stephen Harper in 2012 who brought in the first clean electricity regulations in Canada under that same act.
Right.
And Alberta didn't complain about that constitutionality. So the constitutional stuff's a smokescreen for a fight about the clean energy transition.
Okay, so maybe it'll waste time. It'll keep things from moving as quickly as they might. I guess that is, of course, the question we have to ask is, can Canada, with a federal initiative, meet its emissions goals and targets if we keep running into various provinces, it's not just Alberta, that are going to dig in on this issue or that issue?
Well, good question, and it makes it harder. I mean, the good news is Canada's finally making real progress on reducing its emissions. Emissions are down, I think, about 8% since 2005, after they were going up for 25 years. And that's mainly due to a remarkable level of progress at the federal level. We've seen more climate policy in the last 7 years than we saw in the previous 25 years. Now, the one exception is oil and gas. That's the one part of the economy where emissions are going up significantly. And that's sort of the elephant in the room.
Yep.
So we're on pace to meet our climate targets across all parts of the economy, with the exception of the oil and gas sector, where emissions are up by about 15%. And that's really the friction point with Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Right.
But the friction over this current fight is about electricity, and that's crazy. I mean, the world is moving to clean electricity. Alberta is great. Clean electricity has doubled in Alberta in the last 2 years. It's cost competitive with gas power. It's going to be less costly than gas power in the next 2 years. So this is really about politics. It's not about electricity. It's not about costs, because we can deliver clean electricity at scale and at low cost. Alberta's proven it.
I'm going to ask you for 30 seconds or less here. I apologize for somebody of your expertise, but given all of that and given how important it is that the electrical grid be green, since we're moving to, as you say, more use of electricity, will we make it? Do you think these targets are now unrealistic based on what's happening, or can we get there?
Oh, yeah, we certainly can get there. I mean, if you think of a clean economy, we're going to have vehicles, buildings, and industry powered by electricity rather than oil and gas. That's a simple solution. We're going to need a bunch more electricity. That electricity has to come from clean sources. Around the world, clean energy, wind and solar, is growing faster than any other kind of power. So the world is moving there.
Right.
We just have to make sure we don't get left behind in that transition.
Stewart, so good to have you for this. Appreciate your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Stewart Elgie is the Jaroslawski Chair in Clean Economy and Innovation at the University of Ottawa. Time for the takeaway and adding fuel to a fire. The finance minister had a message for Canada's banks recently. Chrystia Freeland wants them to work with their clients to help ease them through the rude awakening many will experience when their mortgage renews. For a vast swath of mortgage holders, that will happen in the next 2 years. The worry is that a huge number of new mortgages were taken in pandemic and just after, when interest rates were at rock bottom levels. Those mortgages reset after 5 years and will do so at higher rates. Thanks to the stress tests imposed on banks and home buyers, many will have priced in some of this increase, but not all of it. So what happens when those mortgage holders go to renew and simply can't afford to pay more? A few possibilities. They shift their spending, which has a negative impact on the whole economy and causes a slowdown. They have to give up their homes, which has a depressive effect on house prices, or they negotiate with their banks to change the terms and buy themselves time. Which of those three things happen, or the degree to which they all happen, will be one of the biggest factors in how the economy fares in the next 2 years. But should the finance minister really tell banks to work things out with clients? You can see the politics of it. Seems like she cares, which is a good thing. But the policy is a little less stellar. The banks answer to this minister. They live by regulations that are under her control. So a careful balance needs to be struck between urging them to do something and appearing to use influence that might run contrary to their natural business instinct. And here's where it gets really interesting. Arguably, one of the reasons our housing market is so out of whack is that we've allowed it to become financialized. Don't take my word for it. The government's own research argues this. That means that we've come to treat houses and mortgages as financial investments. That divorces the sector from its true nature, which is a basic human need and right. My takeaway? If there's a government intervention in housing, it shouldn't be to leave it even more in the hands of banks to figure out. That's the kind of thinking that created a warped market in the first place. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.